April 22, 1943. The USS Grenadier, a veteran of 4 war patrols, faces her end not from a torpedo barrage, but from a calculated decision made on her own bridge. She was ordered to the bottom by her own men, who chose capture over allowing their boat to fall into enemy hands. Her story was known only through the accounts of survivors, but after 77 years, the submarine has been found, her hull intact, her secrets locked inside. The wreck is not a tomb of casualties, but a monument to a strategic sacrifice. How can a submarine found in near-perfect condition be considered a casualty of war? And what evidence, hidden for decades on the ocean floor, finally confirms the harrowing testimony of the men who were forced to send her there? The answer lies in a story of impossible choices and strategic sacrifice. When we look at submarine losses in World War II, we typically imagine violent ends, torpedoed hulls, crushing depth charge attacks, or catastrophic mechanical failures. But the Grenadier tells a different story. She was surrendered to the deep not by enemy action, but by American hands, a calculated decision to deny the enemy valuable intelligence and technology. This is not a story about defeat. It's about the price of preservation. The USS Grenadier began her life at the Electric Boat Company shipyard in Groton, Connecticut. Commissioned on May 1, 1941, she represented America's growing submarine force, a Tambor-class fleet submarine designed to hunt across vast Pacific distances. At 307 feet long and displacing 2,410 tons when submerged, she carried 10 torpedo tubes and a crew of 80 men. Commander John Fitzgerald took command of the Grenadier in February 1942, just 2 months after Pearl Harbor thrust America fully into World War II. By this point, American submarines were the tip of the spear in the Pacific theater, tasked with disrupting Japanese supply lines and military transport. The submarine service would ultimately account for over 55% of all Japanese shipping losses during the war, despite comprising less than 2% of U.S. naval personnel. The Grenadier's first 4 war patrols demonstrated her effectiveness. Operating from Australia and later Pearl Harbor, she sank at least 4 Japanese ships and damaged several others. Her crew became seasoned veterans in the dangerous art of submarine warfare, mastering the delicate balance between aggression and survival that characterized the silent service. By early 1943, the submarine war was intensifying. American boats were becoming more effective, but Japanese anti-submarine countermeasures were also improving. The Imperial Japanese Navy had begun deploying more sophisticated depth charges, better sonar, and increased air patrols. In this environment, Grenadier departed Australia on March 20, 1943, for her 5th war patrol. Her orders took her to the Strait of Malacca, the narrow waterway between Malaysia and the Indonesian island of Sumatra. This strategic choke point channeled Japanese shipping into a predictable corridor, making it prime hunting ground for Allied submarines. These shallow, confined waters also meant less room to maneuver, less depth to hide in, and more concentrated enemy patrols. For the first month of patrol, Grenadier operated as planned, surfacing at night to recharge batteries and hunt using her superior surface speed, then submerging during daylight hours to avoid detection. The pattern was working, but this area presented constant danger. On the morning of April 21, 1943, everything changed. Just before dawn, Grenadier was on the surface, charging batteries approximately 80 miles off the coast of Phuket, Thailand. The submarine's night lookouts had been vigilant, but as the eastern sky began to lighten, visibility became treacherous, not quite dark enough for stars to stand out, and not yet light enough to clearly distinguish the horizon. At 0626 hours, a Japanese aircraft appeared suddenly from low cloud cover. The submarine's log, later reconstructed from survivor accounts, indicates the plane was likely a Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bomber on maritime patrol. The aircraft spotted Grenadier's silhouette against the lightening water and immediately began an attack run. Lieutenant Commander Fitzgerald ordered an emergency dive, but the Japanese pilot had already released his ordnance. The bomb did not score a direct hit, but it detonated close enough to the submarine's aft section to cause catastrophic damage. The explosion buckled hull plates, jammed the stern diving planes, and most critically, cracked several cells in the submarine's massive battery banks. Inside the submarine, chaos erupted. The concussion knocked out electrical systems, plunging sections into darkness. Worse, the damaged batteries began releasing hydrogen gas and sulfuric acid. Chief Electrician's mate Robert W. Palmer later described the scene. "The smell hit us first, that unmistakable battery acid stench. Then came the sparks. With hydrogen building up, we knew we were sitting on a bomb." Grenadier's damage control teams responded immediately, but they faced an impossible situation. The boat had managed to submerge to approximately 270 feet to escape the aircraft, but water was steadily flooding the aft compartments. The diving planes remained jammed, making depth control nearly impossible. And most critically, the damaged batteries could not provide sufficient power to maintain propulsion underwater. Lieutenant Commander Fitzgerald faced the first of several impossible decisions. Remaining submerged meant certain death as the boat lost power and control. Surfacing meant exposure to enemy aircraft, but at least gave the crew a fighting chance. At 0840 hours, he ordered Grenadier to surface. What followed was an extraordinary 13-hour struggle to save the submarine. Once on the surface, repair parties discovered the extent of the damage. The propulsion motors were compromised. The after torpedo room was taking on water. Most critical of all, the battery compartment was actively venting toxic gases into the boat's ventilation system. The Grenadier's radio man attempted to send a distress call, but the damaged electrical systems prevented transmission. The crew was on their own, adrift in enemy waters. Commander Fitzgerald organized repair teams to address the most pressing issues. Men worked in shifts in the toxic battery compartment, wearing improvised breathing apparatus fashioned from rescue equipment. Others struggled to repair the propulsion system, working in water up to their waists as flooding slowly worsened. By midday, the situation had deteriorated further. Japanese aircraft had been spotted circling in the distance, clearly having radioed the submarine's position to nearby naval forces. It was only a matter of time before enemy ships arrived. Through it all, the crew maintained extraordinary discipline. Executive Officer Lieutenant William Liu later recalled that there was no panic. Every man knew his job and did it, even when it seemed hopeless. They kept thinking that if they could just get propulsion back, they might make it to friendly waters under cover of darkness. By late afternoon, the crew had managed to restore minimal propulsion, enough for about 4 knots of surface speed. But this small victory was quickly overshadowed by the appearance of Japanese ships on the horizon. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant James Adams identified them through his binoculars as 2 destroyers, clearly responding to the aircraft's sightings. With no weapon systems operational and barely enough power to maintain headway, the Grenadier could neither fight nor flee. As night fell on April 21st, Commander Fitzgerald gathered his officers for a solemn council of war. The options were stark: scuttle the boat and surrender hoping for prisoner of war status, or continue a futile attempt at escape which would almost certainly end in the death of all hands. Lieutenant Commander Fitzgerald faced the hardest decision any captain can make. The Grenadier carried classified equipment, coding materials, and technical documents that would be valuable to the Japanese war effort. Naval regulations were clear. These materials could not be allowed to fall into enemy hands. At the same time, the human cost was impossible to ignore. Many of the men had families back home. Was there a way to both follow regulations and preserve life? After consulting with his officers, Fitzgerald made his decision. The Grenadier would be scuttled, but only after a methodical destruction of all sensitive material and equipment. The crew would take their chances as prisoners, rather than die in a futile last stand. Throughout the night of April 21st to 22nd, as Japanese vessels closed in, the crew enacted what submariners called Plan Z, the complete sanitization of the boat. Chief Yeoman Howard Cole and his team burned code books and classified documents in metal wastebaskets. Gunner's mate Frank Pollard used sledgehammers to destroy the fire control computer and radio equipment. The torpedo data computer, gun sights, and navigation equipment were similarly demolished. Machinist mates opened critical valves and removed key components from the diesel engines, rendering them useless to the enemy. The boat's target-bearing transmitter periscope was sabotaged. Even the galley equipment was damaged to prevent its use. By dawn on April 22nd, the Japanese ships had closed to within a few miles. Commander Fitzgerald gathered the crew for a final address. Radio man Tony Gallagher would later recall his words, "Men, you've done everything possible to save this boat. Now we have to save ourselves. Remember your training. Remember, you are United States sailors. Whatever happens next, conduct yourselves with honor." At approximately 0830 hours on April 22, 1943. The sea valves were opened. The USS Grenadier began her final descent, not from battle damage, but from a calculated decision to deny the enemy a prize. The crew abandoned ship to life rafts, watching their home for the past months slip beneath the waves. The Japanese destroyers arrived shortly after, capturing all 76 crew members. What followed for the Grenadier's crew was a brutal ordeal. Taken first to Penang, Malaysia, they were subjected to intense interrogation. The Japanese were particularly interested in American submarine tactics, torpedo technology, and patrol patterns. When the crew refused to provide useful information, their treatment worsened. Seaman Alan Weinel would later testify about the interrogations. He said they wanted to know how our torpedo detonators worked. When we wouldn't tell them, they used bamboo poles, rubber hoses, and worse. Men would return to our cell barely able to stand. From Penang, the crew was moved to prison camps in Japan itself. They endured nearly 2.5 years of captivity, suffering from malnutrition, disease, and forced labor. Of the original 76 men captured, 8 died in captivity. The survivors were liberated after Japan's surrender in August 1945. Upon their return to the United States, they provided detailed accounts of the Grenadier's final mission and their captivity. These testimonies formed the official record of the submarine's loss, but without physical evidence, some details remained subject to question. Did the submarine actually sink in controlled fashion, or was it more severely damaged than survivors recalled? Was the scuttling truly a strategic decision, or an attempt to save face in official reports? Without the wreck itself, these questions lingered. For 77 years, the exact location of the USS Grenadier remained unknown. She was officially listed as lost in action, with her final resting place marked only as Strait of Malacca, a body of water covering over 25,000 square miles. The families of the Grenadier's crew had no gravesite to visit, no concrete memorial to their loved ones' sacrifice. All they had were the stories passed down by the survivors, tales of a deliberate sinking that some historians questioned. After all, would not a bomb powerful enough to cripple a submarine also cause visible catastrophic damage? In 2019, this changed when a team of technical divers and maritime archaeologists began a systematic search for lost World War II submarines in Southeast Asian waters. Led by Singapore-based diver and maritime historian Lance Horowitz, the team used advanced side-scan sonar to methodically search areas corresponding to historical records of submarine losses. Horowitz later explained that finding a submarine is like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is tens of thousands of square miles of seabed, much of it never properly surveyed. The team concentrated on an area approximately 80 miles off the coast of Thailand, based on the coordinates derived from multiple survivor accounts. After weeks of searching, in October 2019, their sonar picked up an unmistakable submarine-shaped object in approximately 270 feet of water. Initial remote camera investigations revealed the submarine in remarkable condition, her conning tower still standing, her hull largely intact, her propellers undamaged. The dimensions matched those of a Tambor-class submarine, but was it definitely the Grenadier? In early 2020, the team conducted a series of technical dives on the wreck. What they found was extraordinary. Despite nearly 8 decades underwater, the submarine's hull remained in remarkable condition. There was no evidence of catastrophic torpedo damage or depth charge attacks that would typically mark a submarine destroyed in combat. Most tellingly, the divers found evidence exactly matching survivor accounts. The aft section showed signs of concussive damage consistent with a near-miss bomb explosion. The open sea valves, manually operated by the crew during scuttling, remained in their open position. The interior spaces, where divers could safely access them, showed clear evidence of methodical destruction rather than combat damage. Naval archaeologist Dr. Miriam Jansen examined the photographic evidence and called the physical confirmation of survivor testimony rare. The damage patterns, the position of valves, and the state of internal equipment all confirmed a deliberate scuttling rather than a catastrophic combat loss. Perhaps most poignant was the discovery of small personal items still inside the submarine: a coffee mug with USN still visible, a shoe, and what appeared to be a domino piece from a game set. These humble objects connected the clinical archaeological site to the very human story of 76 men who made the agonizing decision to surrender their vessel to the deep. The final confirmation came when divers located the submarine's bell, the traditional identifier carried by all naval vessels. Though corroded, careful cleaning revealed the unmistakable marking: USS Grenadier, SS-210, 1941. This was the definitive confirmation. The discovery provided closure for families and vindication for the survivors, few of whom were still alive to witness it. Robert Palmer, one of the last surviving crew members who died in 2018 at age 97, had always insisted on the crew's deliberate decision to scuttle. The wreck's condition finally provided irrefutable proof of his account. The USS Grenadier's story represents a different kind of valor than most war narratives. It is not about a glorious last stand or a dramatic victory against overwhelming odds. Instead, it is about the quiet courage of making the right decision when all options are bad. Commander Fitzgerald and his crew chose to deny the enemy valuable intelligence rather than preserve their vessel. They chose captivity over death, and through their survival, they ensured their story would eventually be told. The Grenadier's wreck site is now protected as a war grave and historical monument. Though no crew members died in her sinking, the site represents the sacrifice of those who survived only to face years of brutal captivity. 8 crew members died in Japanese prison camps, never seen home again. For submarine historians, the Grenadier provides a unique case study in submarine warfare. Unlike most discovered wrecks, which typically show catastrophic damage from the attacks that sank them, the Grenadier offers insights into 1940s submarine construction largely unaltered by violent destruction. For families of submariners lost on boats still missing, the Grenadier's discovery offers hope. If this submarine could be found after 77 years, perhaps others might be located as well, bringing closure to generations of uncertainty. Most importantly, the Grenadier stands as a testament to the human element in warfare, the complex moral calculations that go beyond simple victory or defeat. Her crew chose strategic sacrifice over futile resistance, preservation of secrets over preservation of hardware. In doing so, they demonstrated that sometimes the most difficult victories are the ones that look most like surrender. The story of the USS Grenadier is not simply about a submarine lost and found. It is about the validation of memory, the importance of bearing witness, and the complex moral choices faced in warfare's darkest moments. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of naval history. If you have been fascinated by the USS Grenadier story, there is more waiting to be discovered. Ocean Attacks brings you the untold stories of maritime history, from mysterious disappearances to incredible discoveries. Subscribe now and dive deeper into the secrets of the sea with new videos every week. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next underwater adventure. The oceans hold countless stories waiting to be told, and we are just getting started.